What is up, all you real estate loving individuals? This is episode number 7 of the Real Estate Take podcast, and I'm your host, Wendell Butler. This is your go-to podcast with tons of information regarding the current real estate market, where we get various real estate professionals' current take on different areas of real estate. For today's guest, we have Kyle Wallitner. Kyle Wallitner is a commercial real estate investor who got his start in real estate buying single-family homes in his home state of Washington. But his desire to scale pushed him to pivot into multifamily assets. Today, he is the founder of Boardwalk Investments, a commercial real estate syndication company, and is a general partner on over $7 million in commercial and residential real estate. He lives on a farm in Issaquah, Washington, with his wife and 2 kids. So let's welcome in Kyle Wallitner. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, man? Good to be here.
Yeah, take some time off from the farm, and your real estate investing, hop on the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, for sure. No problem.
I just want to dive in a little bit on your backstory so we can get to know you a little more instead of start talking about just real estate as a whole. So I just want to learn about you and a little bit of your background, kind of how you did end up getting into real estate and what kind of created that mindset to get into investing, and just take us from there.
Yes. After college, me and 2 buddies moved into just a rental house down the road, and we were getting up, going to work just like normal guys. And we'd get this mail. It would be the bill to pay our rent. And it was, I can't remember the guy's name, but just normal. Get the bill, you pay it. And in my head, I was thinking, man, I thought this was owned by some giant company and they own all these houses kind of like an apartment. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together that someone could buy a house and just rent it out. This dude sent us the bill, we pay it, and it turns out he had 11 houses. And so my wheels started turning like, man, that's sweet. I thought it was only apartments that kind of did this model. And that kind of laid the foundation for it. Deep down, I mean, I've always been anti-rent just because I like to live a debt-free lifestyle. And when you have rent, the guy who owns the place, you're living in an apartment, he can just raise the rent at any time. You're always going to have this lingering bill, where if you buy a house and eventually pay it off, you're only going to have your tax bill, which will be pretty small. And you have that control of owning where you live. You're not going to get kicked out. Whoever owns the building changes their mind or whatever. Like, you have that safety net of control. The place you live is your home unless you decide you're not going to be there. That's kind of what got my initial wheels turning about real estate, was living in that house. Seeing this guy had 11 homes back in 08 or 09 kind of just blew my mind. So from there, it just became a goal. I need to get a house. I don't want to pay rent. I just got to get a house.
So yeah, so like were you living in a single family residence? Is that what it was? And paying rent?
Yeah, 4-bedroom, 2-bath house with 2 or 3 other guys. Our rent was $2,000, and I don't know how much he was making, but he was cash flowing back then for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with the prices back then, I bet. We say back then, but even like over the past like 3-4 years, it's increased a ton. He's probably making some good profit from that. That jump started you into get you thinking about buying your own property, right? So you started with just single family homes. What was your first property and how did it start off?
Yeah, so we lived in that renting house down the road. Our lease was up in August, I think it was. A few months before that, I wanted to move from that house into my own home. I was looking around, trying to find stuff, and I finally found a single family home about 15 minutes away from that. I mean, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I just bought a house like the one I was coming from. So it was a 4-bedroom, 2.75 bath. And my goal was to move into a house that I would be happy staying in if I ended up there for a long time, or I could rent it out. So this one had like a separate entrance basement, and it was 4 bedrooms, so a family could live there or a bunch of buddies could live there. So I wanted to have the option of that. I kind of bought it trying to model what the guy who owned the rental home I was coming from did. So I thought, hey, maybe it'll work for me. Back then, the market wasn't as crazy as it was the last couple of years. I think there was a couple offers on this house, but I offered asking. We tied in closing costs with the loan, which I didn't even know what any of that meant back then. But my agent, who was actually an elementary school teacher of mine, who he quit teaching and became a real estate agent, he helped me go through that. He's like, this is what you got to do. Okay, sweet. So I did that. They accepted it. I remember I went back home. My parents were having a garage sale when I said, oh, I found the house that I want. And that night they called and said, we accepted your offer. And I was a mixture of super excited and then terrified too, because the house was a stretch for me. I had told my dad, hey, I'm putting an offer in on this house. I don't have all the money, so I wanted to borrow $7,000 for 6 months was the deal I worked out with him. And I didn't even know, I mean, technically that was kind of like my first raise with my dad, but I wanted this. I didn't have the money, so I wrote out terms and did it all legit. Got the house. He loaned me the $7,000. I paid it off in 4 months. Moved into the house. I was scared shitless for like 3 months because it's big house. I didn't have any furniture. It was just me and my dog. People would come over. My grandma especially came over, and everyone was like, what are you doing buying a house this big? This house is for a family, somebody more established. You're 24. You have no, I think I might have had a girlfriend and my dog, no family, I mean, 2 of the bedrooms were empty for like years.
Yeah.
Just nothing. It was much more house than I needed, but I kind of had this plan, again, modeling after that other guy of what I wanted to do. The first couple months, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And then after that, it's like, oh, I was right. Listen to that little voice and your gut feeling and stick with it. I still own the house today. I lived there for 12 years. It's over doubled in value. Over time, I ended up renting out the basement and kind of house hacking before I knew that's what house hacking was. I didn't want to live alone is what I was going after. I had some buddies live there and they rent the basement out. And then I moved to the farm where I'm at now. And it's been a rental the last 2.5 years.
That's awesome. I mean, you kind of hopped into it without any experience. Did you try to educate yourself at all? Or did you just hop right in? Like, let's just buy this thing. It seems like a good idea. Let's just do it. This other guy was renting to me and it must work.
Yeah, I educated myself a little bit, but not in so much as having a rental. I was more educated in that I didn't want to rent long term. So the fix to that is to buy a house. From that point on is when I kind of discovered the rental stuff. And I knew about the guy who owned the renting house that we lived in before. He had a bunch, but again, I thought he was like some bigwig guy, probably had a ton of money and he's just parking it in these houses or whatever. I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew I needed to solve the problem of not renting forever was my main goal.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
funny.
Tax write-offs.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny to think about, like, even when I wasn't into real estate at all, I would think about like people investing in real estate and you think that there's some like everybody that's in real estate is like wealthy. They're just buying up places. They just have a ton of money and they're just making more money from it. And there's nothing like you can't get to their point. And then once you actually start diving into it, you're like, wait a minute, you can actually do all this stuff. One, with no money out of pocket. Like there's ways to do that. And two, there's ways to leverage loans. It's just all a numbers game. But yeah, if you definitely don't even know about it.
I don't know. It froze. I'm at before it kicked me off. The first rental, I didn't know what I was doing. Kind of just figuring it out along the way. Yeah,
like not knowing about real estate is like one of the biggest things that make you not get into real estate, obviously. It's like one of the biggest barriers is not understanding it, because a lot of people think that you can't get into real estate at all unless you have a ton of money, which is not true at all. It's a networking. There's a ton of opportunities and ways around it to obtain real estate. And you can do it some ways with no money down. You can do some ways with money down, obviously, if you have the money. And there's other ways to leverage loans the correct way to get properties under contract, even when you think that you can't. You only have that one single family, correct? Did you have other single families that you went off from?
Or? From that, I bought that house. I lived in it. I think I lived in it for 2 or 3 years. And I had a roommate here and there. People at the time were having houses built, cookie cutter neighborhood houses. They're getting hired and starting to make a little bit of money. They would have a house built or they're in between moving. And I would be kind of like the crash pad for a month or two at a time as these buddies of mine would transition into the next phase. So I did that for a little while. And then it's like, well, maybe I can scale this up. My job, I work shift work, which I don't want to do forever. I was thinking, well, maybe I can repeat this. I'll just buy another house and I'll rent that one out. So I did that. I did it again and again. I think I had 3 or 4 houses at one point. And then all the while I was working my normal job and we'd go out there and we were doing all the labor. We were putting in the cabinets and doing all this stuff, watching YouTube videos on how to wire something because we didn't have the money to hire a contractor. So we were trying to save money by doing the work ourselves. I didn't know that that's backwards because it took us 10 times longer to do the job than a contractor would have. I think if you were to run the math, we didn't really save a lot of money. We learned a lot, but I don't think we saved as much money as I thought we were going to. I had 3 or 4 houses. That was going well. I was like the man. My buddy's like, dude, you have so much real estate. You're like the coolest guy I know, whatever. But I wasn't. I mean, I was making $1,000 a month in cash flow. And then the refrigerator would go out and that would just wipe out my money for that month. I had a lot of equity. The market out here went pretty crazy. So I had someday money, but I didn't have today money. I thought, okay, well, let's buy a duplex. It's like an entry-level multifamily. Bought a 4-plex. That went well, but they still weren't cash flowing like I wanted. And the market out here went pretty crazy. So I ended up selling all that. And that's when I got into the bigger stuff.
Yeah, your goal was to get more cash flow in the end. Is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to replace your current job? That was your game plan?
It started out just buying real estate to have for retirement. And then I learned that kind of morphed into people actually do this for a living. It's not just a side thing. And then, kind of changed and morphed into what it was today or is today. But I think back then I was chasing just a safety net for retirement. And then that blew up into the now term where like, you don't have to wait 60 to capitalize on some of the real estate stuff. There's ways to do a little bit of it now.
Yeah. And that's a cool thing about real estate too. I mean, acquiring properties, you think of each property like a little bank. It's a little bank account, like a savings bank, or like each one is an individual 401k in a way. And if you have a little property that is renting, you have the tenant that's paying down your mortgage and stuff. And you can also get cash flow as well. But if you look deeper into the numbers, like you found out as you were buying these, probably you can increase that cash flow and find other ways, opportunities within real estate to, number one, yeah, you can still have that retirement benefit because you could hold on to those, but you can also finagle the numbers more with better properties and better deals to replace your current like W-2 income with real estate and become actually full time. Is that why you mainly switched from kind of single families and like 1 to 4 units to the larger type multifamilies? And what was your process going into that?
Yeah, so when I bought the duplex, it's got a unique layout. One where the garages divide the 2 living quarters. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And in that area, there's nothing like all the other ones. The design isn't laid out properly. They've got upstairs, like it's a stack unit. So you have noise from the tenant above. There just wasn't any comps. So when I went to get it appraised to pull my money out, it didn't appraise because they didn't have anything to compare it. So I learned in the residential sector, it's all based on comparable. What did your neighbor sell? What did the guy down the street sell for? And in commercial real estate, it's based on how much money the property makes. It's more of a business. So that was the first thing. I was like, man, this appraisal is something completely out of my control. And it's really screwing up my loan because now the bank is saying it's not worth this much. I know it's worth more than what they're saying, but it's backed by the comparables. That was my first reason for getting out. And I spent 6 or 7 years buying houses, 1 a year. And then I bought a duplex and a fourplex. The time it took me to buy single families, it wasn't scalable. By the time I got as many houses as I wanted to have, I'd be too old. It would take me too long. Moving to the larger multifamilies was mostly a scalability thing. It'll get me to where I want to be faster. And you still get all the same stuff as single family. I mean, it'll still appreciate. You're still getting the debt pay down. You're getting all the tax write-offs. Unless you're a guy that lives in your building as an owner occupied, you're getting all the same stuff as the single family guys.
Yeah, you bought all these single families, duplexes and stuff under your personal name, right? You were just doing like each year kind of buying a new one with investment loans. Were you kind of hopping property and living there? But what was the way you're doing it?
No, I was living in that first house, the big one that everyone said was too big. I was still living in that with my dog.
Yep.
These other ones. The only property I put in an LLC was the fourplex because I didn't have enough money to buy it. So I partnered with a guy I work with and put it in an LLC because that's what the year before that I got a CPA to do my taxes. Yep. I was doing TurboTax this whole time. Yeah, she said put it in an LLC. So I did. And the name of the LLC was the address of the property. So it was... Yeah,
you got to keep it simple. You just put it as the address. Once you decided to switch from these residential properties, did you sell them all off at once, like all together? Or did you start selling them off one by one and kind of come up with a game plan? Like what was your goal? And did you create Boardwalk Investments during that period as well?
Yeah, we had the fourplex. That was our biggest property and it wasn't cash flowing like we wanted. And the prices out here in Washington just went through the roof. I was kind of getting priced out for the level and the money that I had. I couldn't really buy out here. And I actually read David Green's out of state investing book. And that kind of struck a chord with me because they talk about follow the math. The deals aren't working in your area. Go find an area where the deals are working, which kind of blew my mind. I always thought, I got to be in the same spot as my properties. So I got to check up on them and everything. And then it dawned on me that I never really did that anyway. We had a property management company for the fourplex. We managed the single families, but we didn't do anything. I mean, there was a little old lady lived in one. She's no brainer. And then my parents actually lived in one of the other ones. Had no management responsibilities really. So that was more of an excuse. I started poking around bigger pockets. I just sent out a message on there saying, hey, does anybody know a good property manager in Missouri? And this woman, Whitney, responded and she's like, hey, yeah, I invest out there. We should chat. Like, okay, cool. Turns out she runs like a wealth building company and is a mentor and all this stuff. It's like, oh man, she's going to try to sell me all this crap that I don't want, whatever. But we scheduled a 30-minute call and I was sitting in front of my computer about ready to cancel it because I thought for sure she was going to try to scam me. And worst thing that happens, I'll just waste 30 minutes and whatever, it's all good. So I jump on the call, I tell her my story, thinking I'm some hot shot with 10 doors and all this stuff. And she's like, oh, that's all great, but what you're telling me your goals are and what you're actually doing aren't lining up. You need to sell these properties and put them into something that aligns more with your goals. And up until that point, I hadn't planned on selling anything. I planned on financing to take the cash out and then just repeating. So she's planted the seed, sell your stuff and go somewhere that makes sense. My sister lives in Missouri. Just looking out there, being out there, it reminds me a little bit of back home in a lot of ways. We sold off the fourplex and 3 of the houses and we 1031 exchanged into a 20-unit building. Was our first deal out there.
Did you 1031 them all together as a package? Can you explain the 1031 for the audience too?
Yeah, so a 1031 exchange is just part of the tax code that lets you take money you make from existing real estate when you sell and you can roll it into a like kind exchange. You can dodge the capital gains tax and some of the other fees they carry over into that next property. So you're basically just kicking the can down the road. But for investors, it's an awesome tool to protect the money you have. I mean, you're allowed to leverage what would have been taxed money and leverage that whole sum into a bigger deal. So what guys do is they step up, they trade up. You go from a duplex to a fourplex. And in my case, you sell that and you bought 20 properties. You're stepping up while dodging that tax bill. And in our case, the property we bought, it needed a lot of work. We overfunded, meaning we had this big 1031 exchange and we put all of it into this deal. So we put like 55 or 60% down on this property with a rehab loan. We fixed it all up, refinanced it, and pulled our money out, keeping 25% equity in the building. So we had the lower payment. And then I actually took that money and bought another 21 units with my refinance money.
Yeah, that's super smart because one, you don't get taxed on the 1031 capital gains, obviously. And when you over leverage putting it into a property, sometimes it's not a bad idea, especially if it's a fix up property, because one, you probably increase the value of that property, got a better chance of getting a rehab loan because the bank saw how leveraged you were. So they were like, or how much skin in the game you had. So they were like, okay, I will give you a lot more money to rehab it and fix it up. And then after that, you probably increase the value a lot. And then you can do a cash out refinance, which is not taxed as well, because it's just, you're taking a loan basically from the bank and protecting it as collateral with the property. Instead of doing what you were trying to do with the single family homes, like cash out refinancing all those, you just 1031 it into a bigger property that gave you the better opportunity to increase those funds and then do the same thing you were trying to do before and cash out refinance all at once there. Yep. So that sounds like it worked out perfectly. And I mean, going from those single families to the 20 unit though, was it a huge change, or did you fly there and look at the property, or have you never even visited the property?
We flew out there, I think, after it was under contract. So we flew out there with the inspectors and walked around and just looked at the area. I think I sent my sister out there before we put an offer in, just because she lives out there. We didn't fly out there until we were under contract, and we just poked around with the inspectors. We met our real estate agent face to face. Before that, it was all just Zoom calls and FaceTime calls. She went out there and looked around and did like a YouTube live video for us. Once we were under contract, we flew out there and took a look. Not that, I mean, we just wanted to put our eyes on it. I've bought properties since then that I haven't seen. I mean, with technology today, and once you get your team in place, you necessarily have to go out there until the very end. I like to go out there just to show face, but there's a lot of guys that don't go out there at all.
Yeah, some people never even look at their property at all, which, I mean, I understand, I guess, when you have such a process going on. But even if I ever invest in something, I would always want to fly out there and like look at it, just be like, this is mine. Yeah, this is mine. This is cool.
I mean, luckily for us, it worked out. We bought that, and like you said, got all the tax from back home. We cash out refinanced once the work was done, and with that money, I bought another building tax free. When we sold that 20 units, we had put so much money into it, it offset the capital gains from the stuff we sold anyway. Basically got into two, no tax.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, you just keep on rolling forward, avoiding the taxes. I mean, it lets you keep leveling up, like you said. Tell me a little bit about Boardwalk Investments. So when you got that 20 unit property, was that under Boardwalk Investments? Or is it just recently you created it? What was the build up to that?
Yeah, Boardwalk just came along a few months ago. The 20 units, we bought it under our LLC, 13502 98th Ave.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize at the time you could dissolve it and have each partner go their separate ways. We thought since we were all on the LLC, we had to buy something together. Fine, we're all buddies, so it worked out fine. So that one was under the LLC, and then from that point, I just started creating individual LLCs, and I would partner to buy more apartments. From there, I made Kearney 21 is one of them, and then all these other various LLCs to start properties because I didn't want them in my name. My phone goes crazy with people trying to buy the properties I have. This layer of protection under the LLCs, and it's a little bit harder to find me, which I like. You know, the address is, I converted it to a PO box, so I don't get all the mail and just more hidden, which I like. And Boardwalk Investments is, once I started buying these properties, I learned there's people who want to buy properties as well, and they may not have the experience, or I live in Seattle, so there's a lot of tech out here. These guys have pockets of money. They want a place in apartments because it's safe, and they don't know what they're doing. So they come to me and I will place it for them. I'll partner with them and basically syndicate with friends and family and help them get into multifamily because I've done it, and then they can learn along the way and then eventually maybe keep buying with me or go out and buy their own stuff or whatever. So Boardwalk kind of helps do that. We're focused in the Midwest, Kansas, Missouri area. Might break into Dallas. We'll see. But yeah, we buy B-class multifamily apartments, safe place to put your money. You're not going to get these outrageous appreciation home run deals, but our number one goal is to not lose lose anybody money and protect the money that you already did make.
Yeah, exactly. So syndications, how many deals did it take you to like find out after doing these bigger ones to decide to start getting the syndications? And could you explain what a syndication is? Break it down a little more.
Yeah. So the first one was a 1031, and then the second one was a cash out refinance. The third one, I did a debt deal. I know a guy that wanted to place them. He didn't want to own any of the property and have like the risk. So I just borrowed money from him for a flat fee. And then at that point, man, now what? I was asked to speak at Whitney, that woman who I met a couple years before, who initially got me to go chase the math, basically. So she asked me to speak at this mentor thing, a bunch of new investors who are, most of them didn't have any properties yet, but interested in getting their finances in order and buying properties. And one of the guys in that group reached out. His wife, her company just got bought by Google, and they're getting these payouts, and he's got some money placed. So we spoke with him, and he ended up teaming with us and buying a 42 unit property out in Kansas. He funded the whole entire thing. It was a 70-30 split, and that was my first syndication. And then that's when I realized, like, okay, this is definitely scalable. A lot of guys do is they use their own money, and then they do their cash out refinance, and they buy something with that, and then they're on pause. You running out of money is a big issue. If you have an unlimited source of money, you can buy an unlimited amount of doors. That's what all the big wigs do. They syndicate. They raise money from people who want to get into real estate using other people's money, and they just buy safe properties. And the investor's happy because they get a return on their money for not doing anything. The guy running it, the operator, is happy because he can scale his company and takes a small piece of the pie, whatever the math allows. A lot of guys do 70-30 split, but for me, it's whatever the deal allows. I would rather have 10% of a good deal than 0%. Like, I'm not going to just take 30 because that's the standard. I'm going to do whatever the math is.
Yeah, you want to, when you syndicate, I mean, you're the one that's coming with the work and the experience and the expertise of working on these properties and running it as a business and making money, producing money out of it, increasing the NOI, rehabbing it if needed, etc. The person that's coming in as a syndicator, or the limited partner, basically. So the general partner is what you would be. You're the one that's doing all the legwork and stuff for the investments. The limited partner is the one that's given the money to put into the syndication to get a return on it. But as long as you basically coordinate that deal and the partnership with that limited partner, that he's happy or she's happy with the amount of money that they're receiving, as long as you're happy on your end too, even if it's 10%, like 5%, whatever, you can make it work. It doesn't have to be like that exact 70-30 split. It doesn't have to be like 50-50. And it really depends on the property too, because it could be a property that's an absolute slamming deal that if you get 10% of it, you're still making a boatload of money. Now you're doing really well with it, but you can't get it without the down payment or the investment money that you need. So you might as well take what you can get. And that's what's cool about syndicating, because you can provide value opportunities for investors that might not know how to do it or they're scared to do it. And it's better value added investments than just investing in like a real estate investment trust or something like that, or sometimes like stocks and bonds. Like, it's more controllable. And then you have the track record as well from your past properties that you can show them what you've done, and it just makes them more comfortable to invest with you. Did you have to kind of not pitch, but like show your track record of your past properties to get this person think about investing with you? Did you have to like do like a little PowerPoint presentation or something like that? Or was it kind of just a friendly people to people conversation and you guys liked each other, connected well, and it just ended up working out?
Yeah, there was no like presentation. I just kind of told my story and we were relatable. And I mean, one thing I've learned is the deal is one part of it, but a lot of these guys, they're investing in you as a guy operating it. They need to feel comfortable with you, and they need to feel like they can trust you, and they want to be a part of this. The deal is important, but it's almost secondary. Math is pretty simple. It either works or it doesn't. But if you have that wild card of the operator is either not communicative or he's an asshole or whatever, that's something you can't change. People invest in you, not the deal, even though the deal is what makes the money. There was no presentation. There was nothing other than we told our story and he wanted to get involved. That was it.
Yeah. And that's awesome, because I mean, a lot of people get into syndicating without a track record at all. They do that. And it's 100% just people to people. It's not, sometimes it's not even about your track. Yeah, your track record matters, but if you have a great track record and then you're just, like you said, like just an awful person to talk to, and you're like, I can't work with this. I don't want to give this guy money. Then you probably won't get money, even if you're a rock star at real estate. But if you're a great person that's very truthful, very honest, communicate very well, straightforward and everything, you have a way better chance of getting money to invest from others than if you were the opposite, even without a track record. Obviously, having the track record helps a lot because it shows that you have experience and it makes a person more comfortable. But I mean, there's ways to do it. It's all about helping each other. That's what's cool about real estate. It's all a team sport. Yep. That's what I call it. Everybody's in it for the same reason, is to make money and build your net worth and equity to just be better well off financially, and also, increase the buildings that you buy too, give back to the community. So as long as you're you're working with the right people and have the same mindset, same goals, and same positive connection, then it can always work out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, money is just a tool, basically, and real estate is the vehicle. So today, real estate's a people person. You can't do this kind of stuff by yourself. It's a team sport, and you need people, especially on the apartment side, where you need the property manager and you need agents, the buying and the selling agents. You need the CPAs, you need the contractors, and this whole team of people that come together and make the deal happen. It's a lot of fun if you get the right people.
Yeah. To jump back into kind of your out of state investing, because you're buying all these properties away from where you live, that's definitely, like you said, that's scary to a lot of people. And you read a book on it and it kind of opened your mind a little bit. But I'm sure in the beginning, like you said, you didn't think about that at all because you're like, there's no way. Like, how is that even possible? When you first started doing that, what were some of the lessons that you learned getting into it that you could share with us? Maybe if someone wants to get into out of state investing, like what to look for the most? Like, did you reach out to property managers? Did you interview them? Did you look for like recommendations and kind of vet them? Because I feel like property managers are like the number one person or business that you work with that needs to come correct, as you would say, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. We did that. We interviewed, we printed off a list. There was like 50 people on this list. We just Googled like property managers in Missouri, and there's like 50 of them. 15 of them didn't exist anymore. 15 of them were instant no's, and then wiggle it down to whatever, 10 people. It was me and another guy buying this property. He took half the list. I took half the list. My list, I'd call them. They either didn't answer or they're like, no, we're not interested in managing something that big or whatever. We only do single family, whatever it was. And there was one guy who sounded awesome. Everything was great. Everything was great for the first 3 months. And then we started realizing like the statements are late, or they're not accurate, or a unit's missing, or there was some sort of repair that seemed pretty expensive. And I think a big mistake we made was not following up on your property manager. It's one thing if they say the right thing when you talk to them and they do a good job at first, you gotta stay on them. We thought, okay, this guy sounds good. He sounds like he knows what he's doing. Here's our property. And then we were kind of absent. We're out here in Seattle, states and states away. He knows we're not going to be popping in there looking at stuff. And so he kind of got complacent and they were a little disorganized. And it was our first property. We didn't really know what was going on. It wasn't until after we caught issues with our second property that we started realizing something was right. It set us back a lot. We learned a lot. I would say keep your property manager in check. Don't be afraid to ask for invoices, or if there's something that sticks out on the statement, reach out and see what's going on. There's a lot of moving parts with multifamily, and if you're not on top of the guys that are essentially working for you, then some things will fall through the cracks. Some of it's unintentional. They've got other properties they manage. It's not necessarily intentionally malicious, but you gotta just keep an eye on things just to make sure things are going how you want them to go.
Yeah. So out of a property manager, what would you say is like the top thing you look for? Is it their ability to communicate, their ability to be organized? Like, what is something in a property manager that makes them good that you would look for if you're trying to invest out of state?
For me, I look for a property manager that knows the investing side. Whether they're an agent or they invest in properties themselves, they need to see the vision that you're selling. So for me, I want to acquire properties that cash flow so I can live. I want this exit plan out of my W-2 job. And if they don't see your vision and they're not on board with what you're trying to do, then they're just going to be a roadblock. So I think the property managers that either have a construction background or an investing background or some area of expertise in real estate investing is real helpful. You don't want somebody who just manages properties because and they don't own any of them. I think it would be hard to sell the vision to somebody who doesn't have that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes back to also when you get a property manager, it's not like, here, manage my properties, and then you just walk away and you get cash for what they're doing. You have to manage them. People say that real estate investing is like totally passive. It's not, even to the point that I guess the most passive you can get is you have property managers managing all your properties, but you still have to manage them to make sure that they're doing the correct things. You want to keep up with them. You want to every now and then ask them for pictures of your property, ask them for a new video of your property, ask them to go walk the property, just ask them to do things, check like the expense report that they send you and ask questions about it. Even if you already know the answers, ask. They know that you're looking, because if they feel like you're not looking, it's human nature. If someone's not kind of looking down your neck or breathing down your neck a little bit, you're going to slack off a little bit. It's how 99% of humans work. It's just how it is. And nobody's going to treat your properties as well as yourself. You also have to have the mindset that nothing's going to be perfect with a property manager, because it's not their property. They're running it like a business. They're running their property management business to just get you the amount of money that you need. Not like, it's not going to be like 5-star hotel ran property unless you actually own a 5-star hotel and have a managers there. So you just have to kind of understand that. Like when I first turned over my property, my like 8 unit that I turned over my property manager, and I was there like all the time, like making sure everything was good, talking to tenants, like treating them like, like it was overkill, because I was just making sure the property is really well and I was stabilizing it. When the property managers took over, they would answer questions like within 24 hours and tenants were like complaining. And like I had to understand that that's part of it. That's how it is. Like they're not going to answer right off the bat unless it's a super big emergency. And I had to slowly release all control to them, but I still follow up with them pretty much weekly to make sure that stuff is still going good. But you have to just understand that you have to release some of your control when you do invest out of state, but you have to always keep on top of your property managers to ensure that it's running correctly.
Yeah, it's like you got to toe the line. You don't want to micromanage everybody, but you also want to make sure that they understand you are watching and you expect certain things with freedom to do their job, but also make sure they know that you're going to check in here and there and they should have an answer. And if they don't have an answer, they should be able to find it pretty quickly and report back.
Yeah, I mean, it's like running a business. It's like when you're at a W-2 job and you have your manager that is micromanaging you. I mean, you would hate that. Like if he's there like do this, be like, I'm going to quit. And property managers will quit on you if you do that because they'll be like, Jesus, like this isn't worth it. Like this is way too much work for the amount that I'm getting paid. But on the other hand, you do want to monitor it like in a W-2, like the best managers are ones that let you kind of go free. They give you guidelines where you want it and they check up on you from time to time and have like meetings with you and be like, okay, this is where are we going? What is this? Like from time to time, just keep you in point, keep you in check. And as long as you're both happy where you're at, it'll run smoothly. But then again, there's always, just like in any business, anything, there's always really bad property managers that might talk the talk and then they get in there and they start walking the walk and you're like, oh my God, these are bad. But as long as you're on top of it, monitor it, you'll be able to find a good manager to take over your properties.
Yep. There's a lot of good ones out there, some bad ones out there, and you just got to kind of filter through and find what fits for what your goals are.
Yeah. So through these couple larger properties that you've done, what is like the biggest lesson that you've learned from switching over to these large properties?
I would say probably just that real estate takes time. You got to be patient. I'm not a very patient person. I want it now. So just slow down, take your time, and it'll happen. Just work on being a little bit better each day. And then you'll look back a couple years from now and you might not recognize that person a few years ago because you've been growing the whole time. You know, it's kind of like a plant. You start with the little seedling and then before you know it, you have this big tree. You didn't necessarily sit there and see it grow, but now you have this big portfolio. I would say it just takes time. You learn a lot. And once you open one door, another door on the other side opens, and then there's like 5 other doors over there. So it's not linear. You're not going to just go in this straight path. You're going to kind of swerve all over and there's going to be ups and downs and you just got to be patient and ride the wave and it'll all work out as long as you focus on being 1% better each day. I think you'll go a long ways.
Yeah, and that's true because, I mean, as long as you have a set goal, like if your goal is to get maximized cash flow, there's so many different routes to go that path in real estate. So you might start one area and then you meet someone from networking and you're like, oh, they're doing this thing. That's pretty cool. Maybe I want to focus on going to that area. But you do also want to stay within the same kind of realm or the same kind of niche just to get very experienced in that, because that's the faster you learn about something like multifamilies, for example. If you stick in multifamilies and you learn a ton about multifamilies, you're going to be an expert on that and you'll be able to grow a lot faster than if you're hopping around from commercial retail to multifamilies to like single families to like, I don't know, Airbnbs. Like if you're doing everything at once, it might not work, but you want to kind of stay within the same path and you'll be able to really grow. And it seems like that's what's happening with you because you're going the multifamily route and it's just growing and growing because you're learning and getting better for each property.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's really easy. There's so many things to do in real estate, especially when you start getting properties. You'll meet a guy who does Airbnb and you'll be like, oh, that sounds great. Maybe I'll try that. This guy owns car washes and it's working for him. Ooh, maybe I'll do that. You got to get rid of the squirrel mentality. Good at the one thing, which is a great book. Get really good at one thing and then branch out on some other stuff. I would rather be really good at one thing than okay everything in real estate, especially if you're raising money for things. Nobody wants to give the guy who's kind of good at it. They want to go with the guy who knows what he's doing.
Yeah, or the guy that like is kind of hopping from one thing to the other. Like if I'm trying to syndicate money and I'm like, oh, this deal just popped up. It's like motels. Let's go that one. And then like, oh, that one fell through. Let's go do this mobile home. Yeah. Let's go to this hotel. Like your people are going to be like, what are you looking for? Yeah. Like what is going on? They're going to be confused. And if they're confused, they won't want to give you money.
It'd be really hard to market too. Your company would be like, oh, invest with me. I don't know what I'm going to buy. We'll see what I find. We buy a little bit of it. I wouldn't trust that guy.
Yeah, it's not a good pitch, really. It's like, what's the guy going to buy with my money?
Yeah, exactly.
So throughout like your whole experience within real estate, I mean, you said that you met this person through Bigger Pockets. She kind of opened your mindset to get into the larger multifamily. And you almost didn't even have the meeting with her, which let's talk about that for a second. When you're networking, when you're talking to people, sometimes you won't want to like talk to someone just because you're feeling it. But that could be the one person that you talk to that really changes like your life, your mindset, or your experience. Or you learn something. You're like, oh my God. And I've done it many times too. I'll be like, I schedule lunch with people and I'm like, I don't feel like going to lunch today. I don't want to. Who is this person? Like, why did I even schedule this? Like it pops up my calendar eventually. And I'm like, what? Like, but then you go and you're like, oh my God, I learned so much. And with all that networking and stuff, it really increases your ability to expand within real estate. So like like throughout your whole real estate career, like other examples of that, or how like networking has really helped you evolve?
Yeah, I think for a while I was just buying up houses by myself. Me and a high school buddy, we bought a few houses and we're just kind of out here on our own. I didn't really know the power of networking. And then you get to a point where you're like a big fish in this little pond and you're walking around all cool. But deep down, you're like, man, I want more and I don't feel like a big fish and things aren't working out quite how I wanted. It's not what I wanted, even though everybody's like, oh man, you're so much farther along than I am, because they're still living in an apartment. So you have this big, huge fish in a little pond syndrome. So you need to get out there and you have to network with people who have been where you are, people who are farther along on their journey than you are, and who have what you want. The best thing about networking is getting around people who are farther along than you. Like, you want to be the little tiny fish in the big pond. It's uncomfortable and nobody thinks you're that cool, but in the long run, it'll just streamline all your stuff. It'll just catapult you into whatever it is you're trying to be. So for me, I'm an apartment guy. I need to get around people who have apartments. I need to get people who are buying these huge deals, because for me, I haven't done that, but being around them will make it seem possible. I can't go have lunch with the school teacher who has a Honda Accord car payment, because I can't relate to that. I might have lunch with her for fun, but that business meeting's not going to be beneficial, really. You got to get around people who have what you want, and it'll rub off on you. I mean, that's what happened to me. Whitney, that call I almost canceled, she has like 9,000 units or something crazy.
Yeah.
So for her to tell me to sell my precious 10 doors that I had was like earth shattering. Like, what do you mean? I got to keep these. But she's so far ahead. She's been there before. She knows in order to scale, you don't get attached to your property. It's just a vehicle. Put that money into something that'll get you to where you want to go. And that was an easy question for her. For me, it took me, I mean, I was up all night that night just thinking about it. She told me to sell my property.
You're like, not my babies. I worked so hard for you.
Exactly. I did. I worked years for them, and she just like it was nothing. Like, yeah, you got to sell them. What? Because she knew what I didn't know. So you gotta chase that uncomfort feeling. It's that feeling in your stomach, like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. This is really scary. You have to go that way, because that's growing. That's the feeling of growing. You need to get out of your comfort zone, face your fears, and just do it. And it's gonna be weird, and you're gonna feel like sometimes, but that's how you grow. You're not going to go anywhere if you just be stagnant. Get around people who have what you want, and that's how you move forward.
Yeah, I mean, what's that quote? It's you want to be the dumbest person in the room at all times. You never want to be the smartest.
Yeah.
Because if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably not learning anything. Well, you're definitely not, because you're the smartest person. You want to be the dumbest person. You want to go into places you're like, what is going on? And then you can really learn, be uncomfortable, and then that's going to make you a better person. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, you can go, like you said, you meet people on Bigger Pockets. That's a great one. People in the community within real estate on Bigger Pockets that will reach out and just hop on a call with you, just like she did for you. And then there's other like you can join mastermind groups. Like we met in the Better Life Tribe mastermind group, which is one ran by Brandon Turner, who actually used to run the Bigger Pocket podcast, or there's a host of it. But there's like so many opportunities to get into these networking things. You can go to meetups, random meetups within your city. If you go on like meetup.com, you can type in real estate networking, hundreds will pop up. And if you're a new investor, you can just go right in there. You're going to be super uncomfortable. People will be like, well, how many properties do you have? You'll be like, none. And they'll be like, oh, cool. You'll just learn. Just sit there and learn. Be like a sponge.
Yeah. When I went out to Missouri right after we bought that 20 units, the property manager who we ended up firing at the time was doing a great job. And he said, oh, you got to come to this meetup that he's hosting. And there was like 100 people there. It was like a quarterly meetup thing that we walked into. It was my very first meetup I had ever gone to. We walk in and he introduces us, and people found out that we just bought a 20 unit building. And that group, most people were single family guys. You know, they didn't have any multifamily. There might be a guy who owned a duplex or something, but it was like beginner investors, I would say. And when it got out that we had just bought a 20 unit building and we lived in Washington, people were blown away. So there was a guest speaker, whoever it was, and then you're done. You can network with people. And I'm not kidding you. We had 15 or 20 people surrounding me and my buddy the whole night, asking us questions and asking how we did this, and were you nervous? Where'd you get the money? And just bombarding us. And it was terrifying. It was my first meetup, and I have these people, everybody's dressed fancy, and I'm in a hoodie with like my backwards hat on, because I thought I was going to sit in the back and just listen. And I didn't know we were going to get bombarded with all these questions. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. And it was just so uncomfortable for me, but you do it. And then you get better at it. And it's not that bad. I think the anticipation and the buildup of a lot of things is worse than actually doing it. You know, looking back, oh, you bought an apartment. Yeah, it was terrifying the first time I did it, but now it's like very casual. You know,
yeah, it's funny how when you get into real estate, you buy like the first property and you're like, this is scary. And then you give it the second property, you're like, okay, this is scary. But then the bigger the properties get, you're like, I'm just adding, all it is the same property with more doors, but with more commas and like the price. Everything's the same. It's just running the same.
Somebody said, probably Brandon, he puts out a ton of content, but somebody said to me years ago, don't be afraid of commas and zeros. It's the same principles. It's the same everything. Just the numbers get bigger. That stuck with me for whatever reason. Don't be intimidated just because a deal costs $1 million or 10 million or 100 million or whatever.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, but don't let fear run your life.
Exactly. And even like, I mean, they say the bigger you go, the easier it is, which from my experience, it has been. Like when I bought my first property, I had like a condo and I was like, so I was like doing like a live and flip. I'm like, this is hard because I'm flipping this myself. And then I had a duplex and I like renovated that whole thing myself. And it was hard because I was like, Jesus. But then I got to like the bigger unit, like 8 family, and I had a contract to do it all. I was just kind of managing it. It was easier. The numbers worked better. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is even easier. And like, that's probably the same with your 20 units, right? It's that they got easier and easier as you kind of upgraded.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of where I'm at now. We bought 20 units and the 34 unit and 42. And now I'm going to kind of get into, as we exit those properties, into 70, 80, 100 units, because now you're talking about the property management companies have all these people that work for them. And now at those bigger deals, you have a specific property management person who's oftentimes on site, or maybe they're not on site depending on the building, but the only building they manage is this one building. Each property manager typically, depending on who they are, manages anywhere between 60 and 150 units. And with those bigger deals, you can have this guy or girl manage just your building rather than that guy's building and that guy's building and that guy's building. You have the economies of scale are much bigger. So you have the in-house property manager, you have probably a salaried contractor where all they do is work on your building. You have opportunities for savings. A lot of times you'll get a lower rate on the property manager because they're right there on site. Just the economies of scale in those bigger units are much better than the smaller. Our fourplex was real expensive because we had to pay the $75 fee just to have the contractor go out there. It was $92 to change a light bulb one time at that building. It took him 15 minutes, but I'm not allowed to go work on the property. Property manager can't do it. You have to have a contractor and they have their baseline fee to get work done. They got to make money too.
Yeah. And then also the more doors that you have, the more, I guess you would say, safe the property is, because say if you get some vacancies in like a 70 unit property, like it's not going to hurt you as much as if you have a 4 family and there's a vacancy. Like if there's a vacancy in a 4 family, you could maybe even be losing cash flow and not, or just breaking even. A vacancy in a duplex, you're definitely losing cash flow. And if you have a vacancy in a single family, I mean, you're paying the mortgage yourself. Like there's nothing you can do. But the more you go, like you have 70 units, if there's like 15 that are vacant, you can still be cash flowing. You're just not cash flowing as much as you want to, but you have this stability there that you have so many units, so much cash flow coming in that you can still be making money even if there's some that are vacant. And also you have so many doors that if you raise everybody's rent by like $50, it's going to raise your cash flow 50 times 70, which is phenomenal. And that increases the value of the property so much more. So it just, the bigger it gets, the bigger the properties get, the easier I wouldn't say necessarily say the easier it gets, but the more common sense it kind of gets, because you have more opportunity to put people in place that are more on site, and the numbers start working even better because you can manipulate them a lot more and leverage them even more.
Yeah. I mean, you have a single family house and you raise the rent $50. That person, at least out here, it's like, oh, $50 in 1 year or $100 or whatever it is. But if you have a 50 unit apartment and you raise everybody's rent $10, that's number one, way more money for you. And no one cares about $10. It's worth it to just pay $10 than box up all my stuff and move.
But yeah, that's the beauty of going bigger in real estate. And people get afraid of that, but you just got to push yourself to the limit, and then you start learning as you're there.
Yeah, just commas and zeros. Don't be scared.
Commas and zeros. Don't be scared of it. Once you buy one deal with like a comma or two, you'll be like, this wasn't that bad.
Yeah. I do it. I mean, I get in my own head. You got to stay away from that. Just trust. There's so much information out there. Read some of it, listen to some of it, and jump in. Don't get in your head too much. It's not that big of a deal unless you make it a big deal.
Yeah. The biggest wall is yourself in your own mind, basically. You just got to get around that barrier. But just to wrap this up, I always like to ask people this, couple final questions, just to let someone maybe have an idea of where to get some information of what you're doing, or maybe some recommendations of good places to get information from. What are like some books that you're currently reading or have read that kind of sparked your mind into where it's at and you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm an aspiring avid reader, so I read or listen to a lot of books. I would say if you're a new investor, Rich Dad Poor Dad obviously is a go-to. It kind of tells you how to think of money and kind of how that all works. It kind of reaffirmed what I already knew, but I didn't know. It's a simple read, not doing anything fancy in that. So that's the one that helped a lot lot of people get started. Brandon Turner's stuff, he's pumping out a lot of content. I think his earlier books, just the how to invest in real estate stuff, him and Josh Dorkin wrote one that's just basic entry-level stuff. It's a good read for anybody who has no properties or maybe even one or two and just wants some little nuggets in there. The multifamily stuff, I like Brian Murray a lot. Crushing It in Apartment Investing is really good. The Best Ever Syndication book by Joe Fairless, that's one you could, at least for me, you could refer back to forever. There's so much information in that, it's hard to digest and retain it. So I keep that one on the shelf. And if you have a question, there's chances are good he answered it in that book. So that's a good one to return to. I like mindset books a lot. The Miracle Morning for Millionaires, the whole series. There's a Miracle Morning series by Hal Elrod. Yeah. He just talks about how to organize your day, basically getting up early, having this routine. And that book, I think it's full of highlights when I read it. Just so many good little pieces of wisdom in there, and like how to conquer the day is really good. Go for Stupid by Steve Sims. He spoke at one of the mentor things the other day. His book, Go for Stupid, it's about dreaming big and just things are possible beyond what you think are possible. So that was a really good motivator. You're going to read that one and be like, oh shit, I got to get to work. Yeah. I need to do more and dream bigger and whatever. Plus he's got an accent. If you listen to the audiobook, he's like got his cool English accent the whole time.
It just sounds great. You're like, yeah.
And he's a cool dude. He wears like a hoodie. He's got like his eyebrow pierced and a goatee, riding motorcycles. So he's like, he's just a good old boy who happens to work with famous people.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like you read some of these books and they kind of get you.
So that one's good. If you want, just got a wild hair and you want to read something just because it's not really about anything. The Alchemist is a favorite of mine. Gentleman in Moscow is good. If you just want to read for not, if you get burned out on business books or mindset and being great and moving forward and read something silly.
Yeah, you got to mix some fiction books in there once in a while. Yeah, they say the fiction books actually spark your mind more with more creativity than actually the nonfiction and kind of mindset books.
Yeah, and I mean after a while, those mindset books and the business ones, they all say the same thing. For me, they're good to revisit, and it just keeps you motivated, keeps you on track. But myself included needs to get better at reading fiction. Yeah, I think it's important.
It is, definitely is. So just to wrap it up, if you want to tell say anything to the audience or anything like that about what you have going on, or where they can reach you at, like social media handles or any meetups that you might run or attend, any charity events, business links, or just contact information at all, you just want to give that information, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the best way to reach me right now is websites under maintenance. So probably just Instagram, my name, the letter K, Wallitner 1. Reach out to me there. I'm going to start hosting meetups at my farmhouse and downtown. I live in the historic part of downtown, so there's some restaurants and stuff down there. This spring and summer, I'll host a few meetups, which I'll post on my social media to anybody who wants to come. We can meet up, talk real estate, or just email me at investboardwalk@gmail.com, and happy to link up there and maybe exchange numbers or whatever.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it was awesome to having you on here, Kyle. I appreciate it, and you got a ton going on, which is awesome, and hope to continue watching your story and seeing you grow, and excited to see you buy 100+ unit this year. That's the goal. Not 70. Let's get 100. Let's get those triple digits.
Yeah, you can have me back on, and I'll explain how terrified I was and how it's not that. You tell me to listen to my own advice.
The second you close on the deal, I'll just have you back on, and we can just watch this podcast and be like, listen to your own advice.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be like, but it's different.
Yeah.
But all right. Yeah, it was great having you on. Yeah, we'll be in touch. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Kyle.
Cool, man. Appreciate it. See you guys.
See ya.